Okay, hello students. So we're going to give this a try. I am going to video record what is essentially a lecture pertaining to the material that we were supposed to study this past Tuesday, October 30th. Let's see how it goes. I want to start actually by saying that we are really at this point entering into a new era of biblical history. First of all, we're going into what we call the Persian period, dated 536 to 332 BCE, the period of time that the Persians ruled Palestine up until 332 BCE, when Alexander the Great more or less took over the Persian Empire. And I say that this is a new era of biblical history, not only in regards to the ruling power, the world ruling power, in this case the Persians, but also because we have a new situation for what we would call the biblical community. I notice that very often in your writings and in your class discussions, you refer to the people of the Hebrew Bible as the Jews or the Jewish people. That actually, I think, is a misnomer. We know, for instance, that the nation, the Israelite nation, was made up of 12 tribes. One of those tribes was the tribe of Judah. And in fact, the word Jew, even in Hebrew to this day, the word for Jew is Yehudi, literally a Judahite. So we know that the early Israelite nation was made up of 12 tribes, and of course one of those tribes was the tribe of Yehudah, Judah, and the people who made up that tribe were Yehudim, Judeans, or Jews. But I would suggest to you that this nation we would call the nation that we're talking about in biblical history in the Hebrew Bible are the Israelites. After that nation divides into two separate kingdoms, we can talk about the Israelites and the Judeans. But when we enter this Persian period, we really have to have a different language to talk about this people, because now we have a situation where there are some of these people who are living in the territory of Judea. That is the people who once Cyrus, the Persian king, took over the Babylonian Empire and sent these people back from their Babylonian exile back to the territory of Judah. Not all of them went back, and many of them remained in Babylon. And not only that, but some of the people who had fled from the Babylonian advance in 586 BCE, when the city of Jerusalem was destroyed, when the temple was destroyed, including, by the way, the prophet Jeremiah, some of those people fled to Egypt. And so you have a community of people living in Egypt, you have a community of people living in Babylon, and eventually you're going to have a group of people living throughout the Mediterranean world. They don't live in Judea, so they're not really Judeans, but they have a religious, cultural, ethnic, however you want to phrase it, connection to Judea and to the people living in Judea. And so now we're going to call them Jews. That is, Jewish people who are living in Babylon, in Egypt, eventually in Syria, in Rome, in Greece, in Egypt, and these are Jews. And then, of course, the Jews living in Judea are also Jews. But I want to make the distinction between a community that is both a community living in the land of Judea and a community living in the diaspora outside the land of Judea as the Jewish people, as opposed to the earlier period before the Babylonian exile, where all of these people were living in the territory of Judah, in Judea, and I would refer to them as Judeans. Anyway, I wanted to make that point. So what I want to do is I want to start by doing a little bit of review from the Coogan book to set the historical background for us. And, I want to sort of lay out the chronological framework and some of the issues that the essay Israel Among the Nations, the Persian Period by Mary Joan Wynne Leith. This is, I think, chapter 8 or 9, I don't remember, but Israel Among the Nations in the Coogan book that we were supposed to read for today. Some of the highlights of the historical background from this period. So the author tells us, of course, as we know, that in 539 BCE, the Persian king Cyrus conquered Babylon, and by 536 BCE, he had issued what is known as the famous Cyrus Decree. There was actually a little cylinder that was an inscription on a clay cylinder that was discovered in Babylon that describes actually a decree by King Cyrus sending exiled peoples back to their homelands, back to rebuild their homelands, and particularly to rebuild their temples. It was probably a very wise move by Cyrus. It ingratiated people to him. It made them loyal to him. People appreciated the fact that they could return home and rebuild temples. He was a temple builder, like Hammurabi before him, like King David, like every great king of the ancient Near East. Cyrus saw himself as a temple builder, and in this case, it was about rebuilding temples all throughout his empire. Now, what's kind of interesting about this development and the return of the now the Jewish people to or at least some of them, to the land of Judea, is at first the book of Ezra tells us, if you read the material in chapters 1 to 4, which was the reading for this period, the book of Ezra tells us that at first this the early community that came back to Judea was led by two gentlemen in particular. One was by the name of Zerubbabel, and the other was a fellow named Joshua, or sometimes Jeshua. And it is clear from various genealogies that we have in the book of Ezra, but also in the books of Chronicles, which are also documents from the Persian period. We understand that Zerubbabel, who is given the title governor of Judea, is actually given a genealogy that takes him back to King David. He is, according to genealogies in the books of Chronicles, he is a Siena descendant of Davidic kings. He is a descendant of King David. And the other fellow, Joshua, is given a genealogy that takes him back to Aaron, and also the priest Zadok, who was the priest that remained in Jerusalem after the rebellion of Adonijah. You might recall that Solomon threw out one of those priests. I think we're going to talk about this a little more when Lana gives her presentation, hopefully next week. That Zadok remained in Jerusalem, and it was his descendants that then presumably filled in the priesthood from that time period, from the period of King Solomon onward. And this priest Joshua, who is mentioned in the book of Ezra as leading this early community alongside Zerubbabel, who is a descendant of King David, this priest Joshua is given a genealogy that takes him back to Zadok, King Solomon's priest, and also Aaron, who is considered the original high priest of the Israelite community. But what's interesting also is that these two characters, both of them, once the temple is actually rebuilt in the year 515 BCE, as it is described in Ezra chapter 4, these two characters disappear altogether. And it actually becomes rather clear that the Persian emperor was not real happy with the idea of having a Davidic king ruling this community. Or at least that's the way I would sort of interpret it. The idea of a a king, a scion of King David, the ancestral kingship of this community might have been seen as a threat to the Persian emperor. And so we see that this community very quickly becomes a temple-centered theocracy, ruled by priests. All of the political secular leadership is in the hands of the Persian emperor, and all of the local leadership came out of the temple and the priesthood. This would allow the Persian emperor to avoid any kind of local military political leadership, and also allow him to exploit the resources of this community through tithes and taxations that would come through the temple. So this community now becomes a temple-centered theocracy ruled by priests. Now, there's another element here of this community that becomes very important to us, and that is the idea of, we see developing in this community, in the sources, in the biblical sources that we're going to be looking at today, there is a tension between, for lack of a better word, I'm going to call universalism versus particularism. We're going to see that there are really three groups of people in this community, or related to this community within Palestine. This restored community that returned to Judea, or that was restored by the Persian emperor in 536 BCE. And the three groups are the Judeans, the Jews, who had been exiled to Babylon and have now decided to return. There are also the local population, the people who did not go into exile, who remained in the land during the exile. And then we also see a group of people in what is the territory of what was the former kingdom of Israel, that is, the northern kingdom of Israel. And you will recall in 722 BCE, the Assyrians had conquered that territory, exiled the Israelite population, but they had brought in people from outside of Palestine. Probably other peoples from Mesopotamia who had been exiled from their land were then brought into the territory of the northern kingdom of Israel. And there's a wonderful story in 2 Kings chapter 17 that, and I urge you to take a look at it if you have a chance. It's a story that apparently this new population in the northern kingdom, the territory of the northern kingdom of Israel, was having a problem. They were being ravaged by wild animals. And they decided that the reason that they were being ravaged by wild animals is because they weren't properly worshiping the local God, Yahweh.